Starting on this first week of the new year, we aim to bring you weekly coverage of some of the major issues in different countries through the words of pundits there. In our first segment, we turn to the U.S. and I have Chang Seong-kwan, the Deputy Executive Director of the Korean American Grassroots Conference, live on the line from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the program, Seong-kwan.
Thank you for having me on, Sunny.
Right, let's begin then with a few words on the snowstorm over in the U.S. that reportedly has over 90 million people in 37 states on high alert, including Washington, D.C. What is the current situation there?
Well, this past Monday, Washington, D.C. saw 8 inches of snow, which is set to exceed the record previously set in January 2019. It led to numerous road closures in the area, which caused a great deal of issues for two reasons. One, there are a few hundreds of thousands of people who commute to the capital from the suburbs in Virginia and Maryland on a daily basis, most of whom rely on cars and public transportations. And both of these means proved unhelpful in the snowstorm last Monday. Number two, what aggravated the problem was that it was the first day back at work since the holiday season. So the highways, subways, and buses going into Washington, D.C. saw a whole lot more commuters than had seen in the weeks leading up to January 3rd. Especially on the interstate highways leading into the capital region, the heavy snow created traffic jams that trapped travelers on the road overnight. Senator Tim Kaine, for example, who was a running mate of Hillary Clinton back in 2016, was seen stuck on I-95 for nearly 30 hours as he was traveling back to D.C. for work. It shocked a lot of people since the temperature was in the 60s just a day before the snow, warm enough for many to walk around without a jacket. The snowstorm also led to power outages of about 100,000 households in the D.C. suburbs, leaving many families without heat for at least a day. These problems, coupled with staff shortage in local governments and public schools, led to school closings and other disruptions throughout the week. And as we speak, actually, we are expecting another round of snowstorm in a couple of hours.
I see. And also, this past Monday, Seong-kwan, the U.S. topped the 1 million mark with regard to daily COVID-19 infections for the first time. I believe President Joe Biden addressed the nation the following day. Do tell us a bit about what was shared in his speech.
Sure. Most of the message from President Biden's remarks earlier this week and coming out of the federal government lately, really, focus on encouraging Americans to get booster shots. Over the past 6 months, we have seen a huge drop in the number of American adults without any vaccine shots from 90 million to 35 million, but that is still a large population who is unvaccinated. The daily number of new cases recorded nearly 1 million, as you said, earlier this week. And we've been seeing thousands of flights being canceled every day. There are long lines at testing sites and several members of Congress, too, testing positive. I myself have recovered from COVID last week, and it's becoming increasingly common here in Washington, D.C. So the uptick is very much real. As President Biden recognized in his remarks this week, there are needs for additional support for hospitals across the United States. This includes protective equipment, staff, and beds. And in his speech, the president vowed to provide the support, as well as announcing that the federal government has doubled its order of COVID treatment pills from 10 million to 20 million courses in order to help curb the pandemic.
Right, and staying with the president, I understand his approval rating, Seong-kwan, has been on the decline, and some observers are linking this reality to the pandemic. What are your thoughts?
Well, President Biden's job approval rating has indeed steadily been dropping since his inauguration, now at 53.9% disapproval. But this trend is, in fact, very common in the first 2 years of any presidency, since the polling has been taken in the Harry Truman era. Only one president has been accepted from this pattern. The reasons behind this trend are a few. One, the person occupying the White House is usually blamed for any issues in the economy. Number two, those who did not support the president in the last presidential election become increasingly vocal in expressing their opposition, and politics have, as we all know, become more and more polarized. In addition to that, as you may mentioned, Americans of all walks of life are by now worn out and tired of the adjustments we've had to make to live in the pandemic era. Certainly, President Biden suffered a few difficulties since assuming office almost a year ago, such as Afghanistan, inter-party conflict, and inflation. But I'm not sure if the low approval rating is unique to Biden or uniquely high compared to his precedents.
Right, and staying within the political arena, Songwan, the 2022 U.S. midterm elections are 10 months away. And the primaries for congressional and statewide races, I understand, are said to be more important than ever for both political parties. Could you explain this reality for us?
So in the United States, federal elections take place every 2 years. Half of them are the ones that take place every 4 years, include presidential elections, and the others, in which we elect only members of Congress and not the president, are called midterm elections because they take place in the middle of each presidency or presidential term. The federal election taking place this November is a midterm, which is almost always favored for the party, opposite to that of the president. This year's midterm election, though, is particularly interesting to the Korean American community in that it may cement the footings of the 4 Korean Americans currently in Congress, 2 in each party. One of them, Congressman Andy Kim from New Jersey, is running for his 3rd term, whereas the 3 others, all of whom women, are running for re-election, which is a big test for most freshman members. Once the 4 Korean American members of Congress are re-elected, it may really pave the way for them to stay in office for a long while and to move up the ranks within the House of Representatives.
Right. Aside from politics, Hong Kong, what appears to be some of the issues of interest for Korean Americans there at the moment?
Well, there are so many, but I like to share this one thing, which you may know. Earlier this week, a Korean American anchor in Missouri was criticized as very Asian after sharing on TV that her family ate dumpling soup on the New Year, which she explained as is what a lot of Korean people do. The criticism that came from a viewer who wished the anchor to keep her Korean to herself struck a chord with a lot of Korean Americans and really all Asian Americans in this day and age where we've battled the sharp surge of racially charged aggressions and violence against our community over the past 2 years. We've seen some hopeful progress lately, course, with the addition of a Korean American Muppet on Sesame Street, the launch of the first Asian American doll in American Girl, and the success of Squid Game and such. But this incident really proves that we still have a long way to go to be accepted as Americans ourselves, not just a cool new thing in made up spaces, but someone they don't really want to live on the same block with.
Right. And a very quick question before we let you go. We've been covering this particular issue in our news segment here at Arirang since the start of this week. I'm talking about the overseas voter registration for Korea's presidential election, which is slated for March 9th, Songwan. Interest here, though, appears to be relatively low. Is this also the case over in the U.S. among Koreans there?
Well, I'm afraid I lack the authority or knowledge to speak on this issue, as it is not part of American politics. However, from what I've heard from those interested in participating in the Korean elections, while in the United States, some wish that they could vote by mail because otherwise they have to drive for hours to get to a polling site. It seems as though the poll sites are placed at consulates general across the United States and very few other places, which could be a challenge for those not living in large metropolitan cities where the Korean consulates general are typically located.
I see. All right, Songwan, thank you very much for making the time to join us live at this with your thoughts.
Thank you, Sunny.